I would be more than happy if tomorrow everyone collectively agreed to just replace tipping with regular minimum wage. In one of my early videos where I used gameplay instead of showing my face, I talked about how tipping was getting out of control and what my personal boundaries are on that, which, to refresh all of you, is I only tip 20% for Uber drivers due to gas and car costs and full service restaurants, which I originally had at 15%, but I went back to 20% when I went to the restaurant from friend's birthday dinner. Though I should have reminded myself the boundary I'd set was 15% for full service restaurants because the hourly rate is different from minimum wage. And then 10% for same day grocery and food delivery because of things that can change. In the case of groceries, it's because backup items might have to be selected, or they might be out of something and then they have to outright cancel the item. So, hey, if items get canceled, that just means the tip is a higher percentage anyway. So, 10% is my baseline for that. 15% for full service restaurant servers, though I might just lump it into the 20% with Uber drivers because when it comes to Uber drivers, because of the higher cost of maintaining the car compared to just showing up at the restaurant job. Okay, there's a little more to it than that, like transportation and such. You know, for those of you who watch anti work videos, the pay to work phenomenon, but we're not here to talk about that. Today, I want to talk about this article from The Guardian called It's Out of Control: The Fight Against U.S. Tip Creep by Jem Bartholomew. I believe The Guardian is a UK publication, so it'll be interesting to hear the perspective on this from outside of America. But first, give this video a like, comment your thoughts on tipping, whether you think it should just be replaced with regular minimum wage entirely, or if you're okay with it as it is, or if you think we need to have boundaries on it. Personally, I would love nothing more than for the cost of labor at a better rate than what it is now to just be factored into things so we don't have to deal with calculating out a tip amount. But I can understand that businesses need to make their products or services look less expensive on the surface. Anyway, don't forget to also give this video a like and subscribe for daily videos. Alright, from The Guardian. When Garrett Petters, a 29-year-old architect in Dallas, and his girlfriend traveled to Paris last year, one of their favorite parts was eating out. They enjoyed French duck, andouille, plenty of bread, cheese, and coffee, and even escargot. But it wasn't just Paris's cuisine they admired. It was also the different tipping culture. We were talking about how nice it is in Europe and that they pay their waiters and waitresses and we don't have to tip because of it, and that's really cool, Petter said. It felt very different back in the US, where tipping culture felt out of control. Because it is. Look, Restaurant servers at full service restaurants where the minimum wage is different. Uber drivers, grocery delivery people, food ones too, but I lean more towards groceries because I prefer to get the raw materials to make it fresh myself. But I digress. Tipping has been a long-standing practice in U.S. business, where service workers often make less than the federal minimum wage. They rely on gratuities to make a living. But starting half a decade ago, when the pandemic disrupted everyday life and injected danger into frontline jobs, tipping increased and then began to creep into new sectors. Now people say it is inescapable. Responding to a Guardian call out asking whether their tipping habits have recently changed, people shared their experiences and views on tipping, with many suggesting they are now fighting back against tip creep. Self checkouts, drive throughs, hot dog stands, drugstores, a bottled water stall at a jazz festival, an airport vending machine, a used bookstore, a cinema box office, a children's arcade. These are a handful of the surprising places people reported being asked for tips, with several suggesting companies were taking advantage of new social expectations on gratuities. Before, tipping was considered generosity, Peters said. Now it's about guilt. I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, again, when it comes to restaurant servers, completely understandable. Uber drivers, similarly so. I don't know how much Uber drivers are paid outside of tips. But what I do know is that it's getting out of hand for a lot of the examples they listed here, like self checkouts. I guess that's there for if you happen to. I'd say that's probably there if a worker comes to help you out with something there. I guess that's probably what they'd say if we brought it up, or if someone were to inquire with management or corporate. Drive throughs, um, yeah, I can't think of a good reason for putting that in the drive throughs. Hot dog stands, drugstores, the bottled water stall. I'm a little mixed on all those, but vending machines? Really? Vending machines? Used bookstore. Um, I'm gonna guess that it's probably like the cafe within a used bookstore, because a lot of what I've noticed about similar places like that in Boston, I've been researching because one of the places that Skip the Small Talk speed dating events happens to be at is this bookstore called, I forget the name of it. Hold on. Okay. I'll know it when I see the name of it on the Trident Books. Yeah, that's it. So Trident Books, They weren't one of the. I looked up some other places like this as well, just out of curiosity. But apparently, Trident Books has a cafe. That's why they host the Skip the Small Talk event. They also have other events I saw on their website that got me curious. Might do more stuff related to my book writing there in the future. But right now, let's get back to tip creep. Because again, a used bookstore, there's probably a cafe there, which is a little more understandable. Even though, quite frankly, if I had to choose between tipping culture as it is now, or replacing tipping with just regular wages, the entire cost of labor is factored in, the price you see is the price that you pay, unless sales tax has to be factored in, but that's a different story. Because honestly, I'd rather just see the price and only have to account for sales tax. That being said, until this is amended, I will limit my tipping to full service restaurant servers because they're paid the way below minimum wage. Uber drivers because they have a lot of expense going into being an Uber driver who is a contract worker. And then 10% on grocery deliveries, though I might experiment with not tipping on that one if I'm being completely honest. Restaurant delivery, food delivery, not that I would actually do that because not that I would actually spend money on that in the first place because I have mastered some pretty good recipes if I do say so myself. But if for whatever reason I use that, I would still tip on that because of the traditional pizza delivery thing. Though between you and me, I wouldn't mind if it was all just factored into any delivery fee from the get-go. Cinema box office and children's arcade. Okay, I have no idea about what a children's arcade would do with tipping. I mean, what? Are you able to just dump your remaining credits into a tip that the worker gets paid out? Cinema box office. Yeah, that one confuses me because during the time I worked at the movie theater, it was explicitly stated in the employee handbook that only servers in the 21 plus area that I worked in, as well as the server at the little restaurant area, those servers were the only people who were allowed to receive tips. Clearly stated in the handbook. Now, they still had to get paid regular minimum wage because the movie theater was technically classified as an entertainment venue and not a full service restaurant like the other ones at the mall surrounding it. Anyway, let's get back to the article. But a backlash could be brewing, with gratuities falling from a pandemic peak. Average full service restaurant tips in the fourth quarter of 2024 fell to 19.3%, which is a 6 year US low and down from a high of 19.9% in the first quarter of 2021, according to data from Toast. Petters said He was adding less onto the bill now, in the hopes employers would be forced to increase pay for staff. But when he mentioned this to acquaintances working service jobs, he added, some people became angry. I just said, why aren't you mad at your boss for not paying you a livable wage? Well, I don't think your individual manager is the one to blame. If you do want to blame someone, blame the corporate offices. They're the ones who approve these things. Or blame the whole setup where labor has to be accounted for, where they have to cut costs. Me personally, I blame the stock market and being a publicly traded company where they'll cut corners where they have to just to show some kind of growth because shareholders are terrified of a lower quarterly earnings than compared to the last one. I think business owners are really taking advantage of the situation. He is concerned by how companies relying on tips to subsidize wages can make workers especially vulnerable to how generous customers are feeling, which could prove disastrous during a recession. Yeah, that's the downside of this whole arrangement. You do not have consistent income. I mean, yeah, you might not have to trade as much of your time for that. Sorry, I just need to adjust. No, I'll do it after I finish recording. I just noticed that my shoulder over here gets dark. I'm trying a studio light setting on continuity camera. But getting back to the article, the ubiquity of electronic point of sale cash registers, which spin around and offer a gratuity option, is another reason for tip creep. In one of Tom Schultz's local grocery stores in Denver, Colorado recently, the 75-year-old said he took a can of olive oil to the counter and was asked for a tip. We're confronted with this at every transaction, said Schultz, a retired lawyer and musician. Schultz said he enjoyed chatting to cashiers, sharing a smile or joke, and experiencing a brief connection. In general, he felt very comfortable just saying no tip when there was not genuine service. But there's always a bit of tension involved, given the server is typically standing right there. It's always a bit unsettling. It's uncomfortable, he said, adding that the workers as themselves often seemed ashamed about being forced by their employers to request a tip. The impact, Schultz said, is it could become a barrier to real communication with human beings. Yeah, this might push more people towards self checkout or just ordering online and not having to deal with the consequences of putting in a zero for the tip. I mean, some people will probably be concerned that putting in no tip will cause delays or worse, food tampering of some kind, which, I mean, you can always report it to the appropriate authorities if someone tries that. So, let me know in the comments down below if you've ever put in no tip for say a DoorDash delivery and how it went. Because I know there's a viral video out there somebody giving, about a DoorDash driver giving the customer a hard time because they tipped what they considered a rather small percentage. No, it wasn't. No, it was a small amount of money, but it was only for like one item. The percentage was pretty generous. But yeah, this is why personally, I think just eliminating tipping entirely and factoring labor into the costs from the get go is a way better setup. That's just me. For Ellen, a 33-year-old career cook in Worcester, Massachusetts, the rules of tipping while growing up were easy to grasp. 18% was standard for restaurants, perhaps adjusted upwards 5% for exceptional service. She worked as a barista for a year before COVID-19, so knew the importance of tips. Now, she said, it felt as if the social rules on tipping have come unstuck, and establishments often feature a suggested tip starting at 25%. It seems rude to me, she said. Honestly, if they want to do tips, maybe they should just put in a custom dollar amount where you have to type in how many dollars and cents you want to put in. Sure, the suggested percentages keep the line moving, but I also see just the number pad to put in the dollar amount that you see fit would be a much more polite alternative. Even though, again, ideally, we just end tipping entirely, regular minimum wage for all jobs, factor in the cost of that labor from the get go, and you're all good to go. Because frankly, tip creep is part of the reason that I won't go out to restaurants on my own. The only exception I make is the little restaurant area at the movie theater for the sliders before my movie. I will happily make an exception for that, mostly because I know the people who are working there. Other than that, I would be more than happy if tomorrow everyone collectively agreed to just replace tipping with regular minimum wage. I feel like businesses are trying to guilt trip me into tipping more, which I resent, Ellen added. Recently, she has been selecting the lowest option, or not tipping at all, for workers covered by regular minimum wage laws, such as grocery stores and counter serve stations. It feels sort of countercultural, like a little rebellion to not tip, as if you're saying, no, I will not tip. Who are you to even ask me? She said. Well, she's practicing what she's preaching, so credit where credit's due. Yeah, another meme that I've seen online is the rule of thumb should be if you have to order while standing up, no tip for you. Again, quite frankly, better to just replace it all with regular minimum wage. Okay, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because the servers at the movie theater restaurant, they make regular minimum wage. But again, the reason I tip there is because I know them. It's not anyone who worked there at the same time as me that I usually have, but I've gotten to know them over the years because I was a super frequent regular until the start of this year. Then I was just Sonic 3 on my birthday. 4 months later, Thunderbolts after my optometrist appointment because online movie critics said it was actually that good. I still think it was a little overhyped, but it was still enjoyable overall compared to most of the other garbage that Marvel put out. Yeah, today the day I plan to drop this video, I'm going to be seeing Mission Impossible 8. My originally planned return to the theater. It's a similar story for Ian, a 46-year-old home caregiver in Springfield, Missouri, who has recently felt fatigued by the ubiquity of tip screens. I'm not just going to be guilt-tripped by those outfacing POS systems anymore. My rule will be just coffee shops and restaurants and bars from now on, or places where personalized with a personalized service like a massage or haircut. That also at least makes sense. Now, I wouldn't particularly agree with the bar because I don't drink, but I can kind of understand that a little more compared to, again, grocery stores, anywhere where tipping was not a thing at all before 2020. Some people, however, told The Guardian they have chosen to become more generous with gratuities recently. I tip now. I tip more now, as I believe, thanks to the gig economy, more people are working harder for less, said Robert Healy, a 68-year-old bus driver in San Jose, California. I probably overtip unless the server treats me like crap. Healy added, because his pay was above average, he was happy to tip to support lower income workers. But ideally, he wanted to see jobs paying sub-minimum wage, such as many bar rolls, abolished. Every working should... Is that a typo? Everyone working... Oh, no, my bad, I misread it. Everyone working should be covered by the minimum wage, he said. Couldn't have said it better myself. Although, again, I would reserve it for, I guess, gig workers. I can understand if you know the goings on of what they're paid before tips. Because again, we all know servers at full service restaurants are paid an hourly rate somewhere in the single digits you can count on one hand. It's probably just to cover the taxes. Whereas everywhere else that isn't a personalized service, I can understand being like, no, I don't think I will. In Tampa, Florida, 62-year-old Sandra said she has increased her tip percentage from 15% to 20% or 25% recently in response to tough times locally. Three major storms in 2024 in my area, combined with ongoing COVID issues, have devastated some of my neighbors, she said. From the tow guy to the nice lady who works the laundromat to waiters, Florida is focused on service and hospitality jobs, and I see pain in people's eyes. Sandra added, maybe a nice tip won't change their life, but maybe the tip can help them put gas in the car or help with buying groceries. Nice sentiment, but at a certain point, you have to ask, why not just make it all regular minimum wage? Just food for thought. But again, I can respect the sentiment here. Donald Trump, meanwhile, has said he wants to eliminate taxes on tips, but critics say this would further incentivize the spread of tipping culture and low wages, making more workers' incomes vulnerable to fluctuations in generosity. Whatever the outcome of the president's policy, for now it looks as if U.S. tipping culture is here to stay. Unfortunately, honestly, I would be okay if I'd be okay with it if everyone collectively agreed to the boundaries I described earlier. But considering where we're at with tip creep, at this point, I am in favor of a complete 180. Just make it all minimum wage. Stop making us have to tip. I mean, don't stop people from tipping if they want to, but don't make them dependent on it, is what I'm trying to say. When Healy was at a Mexican restaurant with family recently, at the end of the meal, he put down tip $0 for his card payment. He was worried after seeing outrageous stories about companies pocketing tips from workers, Healy said. So instead, as they left, he handed a generous cash tip directly to the servers. These are the people who are doing the work, he said. And then this is just some call to action for funding The Guardian. But yeah, my mom is very similar about preferring to tip in cash. Personally, I avoid using cash where possible because I have a preference for. I usually purchase stuff online anyway, so I don't have any particular need to do that. I've been watching a lot of Jack Morgan recently, which he talked about how he uses cash because of the it makes you see the physical manifestation. Personally, the budgeting system that I showed you in a previous video, that's enough for me to make me actually think about my spending because it makes me think about it ahead of time, especially with the apps for my grocery store, and because I actually take the time to look at the breakdown of my online shopping carts. Now, maybe the whole cash thing helps some people. I'm not going to deny that it might be easier for some people, but at a certain point, you have to have some kind of willpower. Like, you have to have the willpower to only tip in specific contexts if you truly believe it should be for that context. Now, for the time being, if you're heavily against tipping and refuse to tip in any capacity, you might be better off just not going to restaurants for the time being. It's not worth rocking the boat too much because culturally, we can only do so much. And then, yeah, I know that you might have to put up with some pushback. Like, I know that there's going to be someone in the comments pushing back against me on how tipping is actually a good thing. And again, I am not opposed to allowing people to tip if they choose to do that. My problem is with tipping being the norm. Yes, shoving it into every single possible job beyond what it usually was for good reason is taking it too far. Let me be clear. I would rather all restaurant servers be paid regular minimum wage, like the ones at the movie theater restaurant who only can't be paid the server rate because they are technically not a restaurant. They are a entertainment venue. Though I'm pretty sure they don't say the same thing about health inspection standards. And I really hope that the local board of health holds them to the same cleanliness standards as dedicated full service restaurants. So, on that note, I think I'm going to leave it here for the video. You let me know in the comments down below, again, what you think about all this. You're in favor of tip creep as it is, you're in favor of going back to pre 2020 standards, or if you're in favor of abolishing tipping completely and not having a dedicated server rate, just minimum wage. You trade your time for money. Personally, I would be okay with that, or at least going back to pre 2020 standards and boundaries where it makes sense. But also, a complete abolishment of tipping where it becomes truly optional because the cost of labor is factored in from the get go. Where it can be a nice little bonus and not something that people are dependent on. But that's just me. Give this video a like, subscribe for daily videos. I'll see you soon.